Why, hello there. Come, sit down, get yourself out of the bad weather, and welcome for some more rainy day reading. That sentence made no sense, but I'm going to just roll with it, go straight to introductions. We have two new people from Infinite Rainy Day who have yet to be on our little podcast. First up, one of our general writers, Thomas Zoff. How are you doing, sir?
Pretty good. How are you?
Okay, I'm doing excellent, thank you. And one of our seasonal reviewers, Danny Kristen. How you doing, ma'am?
I'm doing well, thank you.
That's good to hear. We are here to talk about Seizon Life, a dramatic mystery about a man on his deathbed searching for the murderer of his daughter's cold murder case. A little redundant to say murderer on a murder case, isn't it? But anything you guys would like to, any thoughts on the series you guys would like to entice our listeners to listen through our What Are We Reading segment to hear about?
Well, I thought it was a bit of a different detective story than what I'm used to, or at least sort of revenge, trying to get vengeance for my daughter's story. That was a bit different, with the way it handled him getting his vengeance and going about that process.
It's a very interesting story. Not particularly because it's really innovative or anything new, but it's a very different audience. It's totally a salaryman manga, and you can totally feel that. And we never get salaryman manga in the U.S. Ever. We get the alt manga, seinen for kind of the young adult or whatever. But man, like stuff like kaiji and stuff, we never see that in the U.S. And this is totally one of those old school salaryman manga. So it's a very different kind of story than I think I've really read before. So that was very enjoyable.
Well, that sounds excellent. I can't wait for us to sit down and get a little deeper in that discussion. But first, we have our little segment here, one that I love so much. And who am I going to call out first to start us? Danny, I'm going to start with you. So, what have you been reading lately?
Well, it's been a couple weeks since I really read anything, but last manga I read before this one was Volume 1 of Wandering Sun.
What? I've never heard of that. What is it?
It's a manga about a boy and a girl, Nitori, can't say his name right, Tatsuki and Nitori, and they're like fifth graders, and so they're in elementary school, and Tatsuki was born a girl but wants to be a boy, and Nitori was born a boy but wants to be a girl, and it's basically them meeting and sort of bonding over this thing they have in common, which I've seen the anime, and it's one of my top 5 favorites, so I've started reading the manga, and frankly I love it. It's I think it's a really respectful take on the trans community and trans children in general, which is definitely something that I deeply appreciate and would love to see more of, frankly.
That sounds excellent. What was the name again?
Wandering Sun.
Wandering Sun. I'm gonna have to write that down. That may be something we can cover here on Rainy Day Reading.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it.
Yeah, and I know Fantagraphics is putting that out, and they do the nice, really hardcover editions too.
Yes, it's a really nice copy. I actually bought Volume 1 hardcover with my birthday money, so I have that edition, and it's really nice.
Excellent. So, Thomas, what have you been reading?
I guess a couple of things. I guess no surprise, I picked up the Prison School Omnibus, but that probably doesn't need very much elucidation, since that has a...
Actually, I have yet to read Prison School, so I'd love a little
okay.
a little elicitation there.
You think I'd be more practiced in this, but it's man, it's basically you have this very talented artist. I don't know if you're familiar with Me and the Devil Blues, which was a Like
I have not read that. I have heard of it, and it is on my list.
yeah, I've not actually read it either. I remember when it came out back in the sort of manga bubble. It was only 4 volumes in Japan. They put it out as 2 volumes here. It's the story of Robert Johnson, the blues man, who sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads at midnight to learn how to play the guitar well. And it's a supernatural horror story in the American South, and of course it didn't sell very well in Japan, and it got canceled. Um, and so he turns around and writes the trashy exploitation manga. And like it starts, it's about 5 boys who transfer into what was previously an all-girls school. The girls ignore them, or we find out plot-related reasons later. So they decide to go peeping, and they get caught and are sentenced to the prison that's on the school campus. And things just get more ridiculous from there. It starts off very kind of spiteful, but after a while you get the feeling that he just actually decides to just run with the crazy story, and it becomes increasingly sympathetic and elaborate, and it's a really good series, and a lot of people who you would not suspect to like something so awful basically come around to really enjoying it, and I'm very glad that it's finally the manga's coming out. Apparently, I remember back when I thought it was so trashy to not even approach. I mean, I remember people asking Kodansha USA about it, and they were basically like, "Yeah, no, we're not putting that out." So it finally found its publisher again, who doesn't really seem to have any qualms about publishing content. So I'm happy to see it, and I've read the first 2 volumes in the omnibus like 3 or 4 times. So yeah, I've been rereading that.
Alright, well that does sound very interesting. I've already had Jonathan tell me that the anime is a must-watch this season. I will eventually have to pick this up. I will, because it does sound fantastic. It really does. I like Monster Musume, so I can definitely say, without a hint of shame, I love good trash.
Yeah,
Alright,
yeah,
as for what I...
It's definitely in the Golden Boy school of high-quality garbage.
Oh, Golden Boy's terrible. Alright, as for what I've been reading, I was reading something that I hoped to talk about this week, but sadly I could not finish it. I'm only 4 through 10 volumes of it, so I decided to go for an easy choice and talk about one of my new favorite mangas that I picked up last anime season, My Love Story, or probably also known by its Japanese title, Ore Monogatari, aka that confusing title that is not a part of the Monogatari universe. It's written by Kazume Kawahara with art by Aruko, who I believe was the high school debut person. And the only reason I know that is I'm holding the first volume in front of me, because I keep all 3 volumes by my computer desk for quick access to little bits from each chapter. It's basically a story of a man, Takeo Goda, this big, beefy man, obviously not terrible looking based on the artwork, but not as popular with the girls as his friend Suna, who is basically he is the protagonist to a shoujo manga. He's the hot guy. He's the one every girl falls for, and instead we have Yamato, who falls for Takeo, and they start dating, and it's this very charming. I think the best way to describe it is this manga is a celebration of everything beautiful about your first romance. About how when you're with that person, nothing else matters, and sure, things will come up, sure, things can go wrong, but it's just like at that point in your time, you're in your springtime, you cannot be touched, and you're so happy with life at that time. And I'm sure, I don't know if the manga or the anime or anything is going to really go into any more detail about them working out the relationship. They've already had the whole, other girls falling for Takeo bit. They've already had they've already had multiple times where Takio has done ungodly feats of amazing strength and agility in order to prove his love for Yamato. And really, we've also seen that Takio is a complete airhead. He doesn't know how to read people, so I'm sure that'll be a continued plot line of going ons in their relationship. But at the same time, it is a very happy series. It is a very joyous series, and I doubt seriously that this series would ever get dark and gloomy. And it knows how to do its happy and cheerful plot line well, and that's all it really needs to do. And so that's why I would definitely recommend My Love Story. It just either watch I'm sure the anime is streaming on Funimation if you want to watch it subbed. You know, that'll get you a good idea of what it's like. That's where I first heard of this series. And I read the first 3 volumes and I loved every page of it. But sadly, we have another story. After that, we have another story of love and revenge now that we must talk about. One not quite as happy, don't you two agree?
Oh yes,
A little bit sad. A little bit sad.
To say this is heavier than an elephant might be putting it lightly. This is Seizon Life, and allow me to read to you all the plot line. Masayo Takeda is a salary worker in Japan, whose wife has died of cancer. His daughter has been long dead for 14 years, or missing actually, and now that he's been diagnosed with cancer himself and is dying, with only 6 months to live, the man decides to kill himself, to be done with his life. When he receives a phone call from police saying that they found his daughter's body, and that the limitations for the crime were to run out in 6 months, the same amount of time Takeda actually has to live. And so this man dedicates himself to retracing his daughter's steps and finding out who murdered her, who made her disappear those 14 years ago. And that's basically what the manga's about. So, obviously this is a mystery. This is all about trying to find the killer, trying to figure out how to trap him. And so, I guess that's the first question I would want to ask you guys. How'd you think the mystery worked out in this manga? I guess if you're waiting for me to pick one of you so you don't step over each other, Thomas, let's start with you.
I'd probably have some minor qualms about the convenience of certain things. I mean, it being a cold case, realistically, probably everything would have ended unhappily, but that wouldn't be a very satisfying story. So I will grant it some sort of the miraculous turns that might stretch credibility, but I have to say, I had planned to read it gradually over a week, and I read the whole thing in a night. So I can't say that it wasn't extremely effective at grabbing your attention. The fact that it was only 3 volumes, helped. If it was a lot longer, I wouldn't have been able to just polish it off like that. But realistically, yeah, it's not quite a documentary, but it was very, very gripping, and I thought pretty effective in going after sort of like I was saying, the fatherly salaryman audience that it's targeting.
All right, everyone. So Skype decided to fuck off on our call. So anyone want to continue our thoughts on the story? So for me to say, I agree with you. This was a very quick read. Everything feels very fluid when you read this. The pacing is very well done. Nothing is revealed too quickly. And that of course is very important to a mystery, because if it goes too quick, it feels like it wasn't a mystery at all. It was just like putting 2 and 2 together, which a mystery should never feel like until the very end. And it didn't go too slow. It didn't drag. I do feel this was a very fluid read. Danny, do you agree with this, or?
Yeah, I definitely agree that I thought it was paced well. That was a really fluid read. I read through the first volume in one sitting. I was gonna space it out and do one volume a day, and so I'd read it over 3 days. But I ended up just reading the last two volumes in one sitting, which didn't even take very long because they're pretty short, pretty fast paced, but they never feel like too quick. It doesn't feel like you're jumping from one thing to another. It feels just
Yeah.
like a gradual reveal of information.
Which is funny. It's funny you say that two volumes went quick because those were 30 pages a chapter. I don't know if you guys even noticed that.
No, I didn't.
So yeah, that honestly I think is a testament to how well the pacing in this series is. Like you don't even realize, despite the fact this has 10 chapters more than a usual weekly series, or not 10 chapters, 10 pages. Like you don't even notice them. It's all just a part of the connecting story.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So yeah, and I really also think it was a part of our main character. Again, this is a very heavy-handed series. It immediately deals this guy the worst hand he has.
Yeah.
And yet, I feel like the fact that even though, like, he doesn't, like... I feel like he should have given up almost. I feel like it was almost not realistic that he hadn't give up. And I feel like that was the whole point of him trying to kill himself in the beginning, was showing that he did, that this whole finding his daughter was like the thing that brought him back from the very edge of the abyss.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely, I, I guess he didn't feel realistic because I guess he was like the genre, the salaryman mangas, I guess, Burning Heart Shonen equivalent, just very, very pure of heart, pure of intention, um, pure of will and resolution. Just because, like I was saying earlier, I thought it was different just because of the way he goes about his vengeance. He doesn't actually, when we think of a man getting vengeance for his daughter, we think of Taken or
Right.
things like that. Just very violent, very personal vengeance outside of the law. But this was entirely within the law. The only time he actually lays hands on anyone, he never goes through with it because he knows that would disappoint his daughter. So he works completely with the police, and it's just he was a very pure hero.
You're right. I
Ve-
didn't really think of it from that aspect. It kind of reminds me of Old Boy in a way. The manga, not the movie, which is definitely more extra legal. But yeah, it's
Oh yeah.
very sort of by the books. The whole statute of limitations thing is played, um, to its fullest extent, going up against the end of the the law, and how he can get his revenge legally and not resorting to your usual kind of action movie gunfire cliche.
it definitely, I think, would have been a weakness of the story if he had just broken down if he had broken down and gone through with trying to kill the murderer himself. And in a way, I'm very glad that he had this moral compass within him that stopped him from doing that. And it always was like throughout the series, it was always about he knew he couldn't find strength himself, so he basically always gave credit to all his own decisions, to the spirit of his daughter being there. His daughter gave him these clues and these answers. That his daughter, it's mainly he doesn't at this point. I feel like he is worn down and beat down by everything life's thrown at him, and is basically equating what is his own luck and his own work ethic to his daughter giving him the answers. And that really, I think, in a way, despite the fact of how strong the character's shown, it also brings you to pity him, I think, because it's obvious that this is a man just beaten down by life.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
a lot of it. Besides solving the mystery, is just kind of him regretting being a bad parent, or
Yeah, that
being.
was much of the first volume when he was retracing his daughter's footsteps. It's like, oh yeah, I really don't know that much about my daughter. This is terrible. And you and it's really understandable because there are parents, especially like, it's funny. Like, this was obvious. The timeline of this series takes place in 1999. But even today, that resonates, that parents have to work. Sometimes they don't spend as much time with their child as they can. That's something that crosses all kinds of cultural borders and can resonate with anyone. And again, that's another thing that really that really works to this hero's advantage.
Yeah, and but yeah, and it's definitely something very different to read in manga. Just like I was saying, that's the kind of thing that doesn't come over. So this appeals to the parenthood, and although I mean it is a universal thing, we so often get stuff that's targeted at a young audience in the U.S. So we really don't kind of see stories of that type um, brought over.
And that's why we created this podcast.
Oh yeah, no, definitely, because um, yeah, it's definitely not something I could ever see being licensed.
I'll be honest, I can't say anything won't be licensed anymore
Yeah.
after the fact that he finally brought Master Keaton over.
That's true. I mean, now's the best chance than ever, but it's still, yeah. I'll just say
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
more of a long
I agree
shot
exactly
than
with what you say. Like, I walk in and I see, oh, Monster Musume. Oh, it's that Cyclops manga where she's a school nurse and she has no depth perception. It's a really stupid comedy. I see all the new big shonen series that they're trying to make into the next Naruto or One Piece or Bleach. But then, you look and you also see manga like Solanin, what did you eat? What's that other one? I know there was one like what, or no. You are what you eat is another one, and it was what did you eat yesterday? Like that's another series that came over,
Mm-hmm.
that's more targeted toward adults. Nowadays there's definitely a lot more manga that comes over that's for adults, and I'll admit, like each of them I think does have a little more at least young adult appeal. I won't say child appeal. But we're definitely moving in a direction where all these manga that are directed at older audiences are coming out. And I'll be honest, I don't keep up with sales numbers. I don't know how well they're doing, but if they are doing well, I wouldn't put it past this series maybe to get a resurgence, because it's definitely a good series. And I feel like time will only prove that fact more.
And the artist is that Keiji Kawaguchi, right, of the Silent Service.
He certainly is.
So and I know his Eagle uh, was back put out by Viz back in the day, and I think maybe a couple other things. But yeah, he's a sort of a big adult manga mainstay in Japan. He did Silent Service and that Zipang and all sorts of adult and military themed manga. So yeah, we really don't see a lot of that type of stuff over here. So yeah, it's a very different kind of manga than what I was used to.
Speaking of artwork, I thought that this was beautifully artistically. I think the only thing I really didn't like is the thing is I don't know what it was about the faces. I thought the faces looked okay, but then the noses kind of looked really freaking big, which is funny because most of the times when I look at a series, it's like they have no noses. But I would argue that noses on some of these characters were way too big. I don't know. That's just a nitpick for me, but otherwise, I mean, the backgrounds I thought looked beautiful. I thought each character had a good design, aside from my one little note.
Oh yeah, no. Go ahead.
And this is why I called names earlier.
Yeah, I thought it was good artwork. Definitely like the backgrounds, but something about it overall just didn't really appeal to me, despite being good. Just I guess not my favorite style. It did feel at points kind of like it was sort of clashing different styles, just because especially when you had like Takeda in the same room with spoilers, I guess, his daughter's killer, and because they
don't continue that. I don't want to spoil that.
oh yeah, I won't talk about more about that, but just like the different art styles between them, they had very different designs artistically, I thought. While one of them seemed more realistic, while Takeda was he's more, I guess, cartoonish.
Yeah, I'd argue that Takeda more than any. I think that's exactly what I was thinking of when I said the nose was too big.
Yeah.
Is that he does seem a bit more cartoonized. Again, maybe that was going back to what I was saying, how some series, even though they're pointed to adults, they also have little things to appeal to a younger adult audience. Maybe that was the reason for that, but I kind of agree that Takeda did stick out a bit because of how he looked in this series. Which, I mean, fair enough, he's the main character, he has to stick out. But there were actually some really good looking basically settings, I guess is the best way to put it. When they're in a giant car, basically car junkyard,
Right.
and it looks like cars over the horizons and stuff. I thought that looked really good, and it was interesting too because when you're looking at it, it's not just like, oh, they just drew a bunch of the same car. It's like each one looks a little different enough so that you could say, oh, this is a different model than this one. And it's like little things like that I love. I love little details in the background that add more life to the world. That's why I love manga that really put time into into the artistics of their background. I don't know if that's a proper way to say that. I apologize if not, but I do think that was something really to be enjoyed. Thomas, what about you? Anything to say about the art?
Uh, Keiji Kawaguchi's been doing manga for quite some time, so I kind of had just basically that the story takes place in the 90s and it flashes back to events in the 80s. It's kind of an interesting mix of decades in a kind of a way, because when he's back drawing like 80s clothes and 80s hairstyles, you kind of get the feel of, his art back in the 80s. And so it's a very interesting sort of retro style. And I like the look of 80s and 90s manga. I know a lot of people do not, and it affects sales at sometimes. But it's not completely dated either. I get what you're saying about the main character as well with his sort of big nose. I'm wondering if that was added as a detail to kind of contrast with the gauntness of his face, because as the story progresses and he gets sicker, he kind of thins out, and I guess the nose may be there to just kind of give him I guess sort of a contrast with the thinness of it. But no, the art is really impressive. He's a well-known artist for a reason, and yeah, there are a lot of memorable scenes, and I thought the use of color in the car yard scene was also good. There's a brief section of colored pages in the middle there that
Yeah.
expose some important plot information, and that was also really well done.
Yeah, I can always appreciate a series that uses colored pages to the story's advantage rather than just doing like, oh, it's like a little splash art in the beginning.
Yeah.
I can always really appreciate that, and I feel like that's what happened there, is because otherwise, like, I don't think that page would have had nearly the impact that it would have had otherwise. And I hope we haven't said what it was, because again, that's kind of a spoiler.
Oh yeah,
if we
no,
have.
I avoid saying anything like that.
Excellent. And speaking of spoilers, I not going into them. Actually, that's not speaking of spoilers in that case. I think we pretty much covered the majority of this series without going into them, which that's awesome. That might actually be a rainy day reading first. But since it's a mystery series, I kind of also didn't want to go into spoilers, because this is a good mystery. And so I think in that case, I think we're basically done. Let's sum up our final thoughts. Starting with you, Danny. How are you doing? What's your thoughts?
Doing good. I I quite enjoyed this. Quite enjoyed this manga. I didn't really know what to expect going into it, but I like I said, I thought it was a pretty quick read, which was nice, and I thought it was a nice mystery, a nice change of pace from the kind of manga I'm used to, and I thought it handled some of its themes and motifs well, like as we were talking before the podcast, just about the name, how it means more. While it means life, it means more survival instinct, like Thomas pointed out, and that's basically that's what he's doing. He's just surviving. Because at the start of the manga, he's like right about to kill himself, and he stays alive to find out who killed his daughter, and then at the end he sort of rediscovers a reason to keep living, and it it goes he goes from the Seizon, the having just acting on pure survival so he can save his daughter to, well, not save his daughter, but put her to rest, basically, and to going to really starting to live. And I thought it really handled that whole theme well.
All right then, Thomas, what did you think?
Yeah, I guess like I was saying earlier, I got cut off. I really enjoyed it. I was planning on reading it over a longer period of time, but I kind of crammed it all in. It's a good mystery. Like, it doesn't have any sort of major twist that first of its type, but just the style of it is different than the kind of usual thing that we see. It's sort of a kind of a manly melodrama, and it's all about perseverance and staying the course, and I guess keeping to your ethics. So it kind of has the salaryman sort of modern samurai manly spirit of just gaman suru, putting up with hardships and carrying on. Which is a very different aesthetic than both American crime thrillers and the more youth-focused thing. I mean, of course, the perseverance and hard work is of course the big shonen mainstay, but it's very interesting to read this reinterpreting those themes for the older audience, and you can really tell that it's kind of a story meant for 40 and 50-year-old salaryman. And that's not to say it restricts the audience and other people wouldn't enjoy it, but it's very interesting to see those themes articulated to a different target audience than we're usually used to see. So I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, I can understand that. You're right. It's not restricted, because I don't think there's a single person here over 30 that didn't enjoy it. So I don't actually know your age, Thomas. So I really hope I didn't just insult you. Okay, good. All right, so I agree with both of you. I thought that this was a lovely mystery, well paced. The character was likable. All the one thing actually I realized that we didn't talk about was the kind of the inner looking into the police work and how they handled it. And I think that was a nice little look, how they basically, like, everything. It was very obvious that a lot of time was moving very fast in the series, despite how well it was paced, because everything that the police were doing, they talked about it, and then it seemed like way more time had passed than you realized as they kept referring back to the statute of limitations, which I liked that as well. I definitely think that this is a great series if you weren't a fan of Detective Conan, for example. I think that this is more up your alley. It's more a believable a mystery than something you would see in something like Detective Conan, like CSI, like those shows and series. And I think it does fulfill a need that a niche in the audience that definitely was looking for something similar to this. I hope that came out okay. So I think that's it. I think we are done talking about Seizon Life. You guys have fun?
Oh yeah,
I did have fun.
Excellent. All right, so thank you all for joining us. Thomas, got anything you want to plug?
No, not particularly. Not this time.
Okay, Danny, anything you need to plug?
No.
Okay, that's very easy. So Say goodbye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.